How are you?
I'm doing good, good. It's a beautiful
Awesome,
day.
awesome. It is. It is. I'm so happy we're back. Welcome, everyone. This is the Getting to After podcast, where we help women in midlife tap into their transformation. We do that through core energy coaching and through emotional freedom technique. And right now, we are devoting this time to a special episode specifically dedicated to domestic violence and transitioning out. And Morgan is finally at a place in her life where she's able to tell her story. So you might have missed episode 1 of this 5-part series. If so, make sure you hit our playlist on YouTube where you can check it out, where she was talking a little bit about kind of just starting out. I want to let you know that if you are in the midst of this, oh, I almost forgot my disclaimer, Morgan, so important. If you have children or you're in a situation where someone might be around where this is not a topic that would be safe for you, I would really recommend putting on headphones or just bookmarking this to watch it later. You can always put it in your saved videos on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're on. You can save it so that you can listen to it later when you're safe, because we are talking about domestic violence. And sometimes if the abuser might hear that you're listening to that, that might, spawn a situation. So just make sure you're safe. I'll give you a second to do that. So Morgan, first of all, I want to just congratulate you on last week. Last week was tough, right?
It was a lot, like a lot, a lot. Like so much was being released while we were talking about this, even though it's for a good reason. You know what I mean? It's still heavy. It's still
Yeah.
really heavy.
Yeah. I know that last week you and I both had this visceral reaction. We were so excited to have the conversation, but both of us kind of got sick. I had a massive headache.
I was in bed.
Right? We both did a fair amount of crying. Um, and I wanted to share that because even though, of course, we do use emotional freedom techniques, so we were tapping all week we were like tapping, just, trying to disconnect from the negative emotions that were going on. It's so important to us getting these episodes out, and it's so important to us sharing this message, but at the same time, there's a struggle. So again, for those women who might be going through this, but be on the cusp of like, I want to tell someone, what might you want to tell them?
That sometimes it takes a second to get there, but you're going to get there. And when you finally get the opportunity to speak on it, no matter how little or small or like big it is that you get to talk about it, it is so freeing. It is such a huge release to be able to acknowledge your truth, or have
Yeah.
somebody else acknowledge it. Oh, yeah, like for you to be able to realize that it's not all in my head. And
Yes.
like, what was interesting is seeing um people's like response to the things I would say, because it's my normal, right? So the crazy chaos is my normal. So I didn't really think much of it. But then when I would be telling my story to people, like the look on their face, I would stop and be like, oh my goodness, did I say something wrong? But then I have to remember how deep it is, that this is my everyday reality. Like
Yeah.
it's not normal. This is the
Yeah.
things that were my normal isn't anybody else's normal, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of put me in check a lot of times,
Yeah.
and helped me realize how real it was, and that something needed to change, something needed to shift.
Yeah. And it was your normal. Again, for those of you who haven't met us, I'm Chateau Morris. This is Morgan. And when we met virtually. We met virtually several years ago, and I didn't know anything that was going on. I
Mm,
just knew it felt odd. I knew what normal marriage looked like. And her now deceased husband, it didn't seem normal, but then there were these normal things, big vacations, a lot of very
mm,
demonstrative things, which we'll talk about probably next week. Um, big gestures, big giant gestures. And I was always like, well, that's a big gesture. But then I would feel like you were pulling away, becoming very quiet. And I was always questioning myself, like, did I offend her? Like, what's going on? I was always apologizing because I didn't know yet what was happening. So all of that is a part of it too. So for those of you who are friends of someone who's going through something, or you think they are, we are
mm.
going to be putting out some resources. We are about to release our, I can't, big
Already.
smiles. We're about to release our very first e-zine. This is something I want to do forever. And so it's the Getting to After Diary. And we were thinking we were going to have it be a newsletter, but we realized we had more to say. And so we're putting out our first edition this weekend. We are The World Beyond Measure. We don't even have a link yet, but it'll be there. It'll be there in the description box because it's coming
Oh,
right after we edit this video.
that's
Um,
awesome.
but it's our very first magazine. You can download it. You don't have to pay for it, but there's going to be great information, not just about domestic violence, but this particular special episode, this particular special issue, rather. We've done that because, it's this is a series for that. So
Mm,
the magazine will be available to you. It'll have some great resources. And also this particular podcast, these episodes, we're going to be adding to them throughout the year. So you can always come back here to get more insights and more information, more, how do I cope with what I'm going through and feel like a whole person? Yep.
mm.
So today, I want to talk a little bit about what freedom looks like. What does freedom look like? Um, Morgan, I remember that when I was editing the magazine and editing your article, which is so awesome, about a trip we took back in March of this year, March of 2024 in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Um, and it was simple. We didn't do anything big or grand. We were going to a business conference and we said, let's take a half a day and just go have some fun. We didn't have our kids with us. I have my husband with me. I'm like, we're just going to go have some fun. And fun for us is very small. Like other people club hop or something, like, no, we were walking the streets, taking pictures,
That's awesome.
making videos. And
Yeah.
we found this area called Luminous Lane. I think they say it's an uptown. I don't know. Uptown, downtown, East Town, somewhere in Charlotte. Okay. I'm
Right.
from Maryland. Right? So we found this alley called Luminous Lane with all these beautiful murals. And why don't you go ahead and talk about what that experience was like for you?
Well, it was just absolutely amazing. The artwork was phenomenal and everything. It's just like a whole there's a whole alley dedicated to it, but then also within like a 4 or 5 block radius, there's murals all over the place. There's phenomenal sculptures and things like that. But what I loved about it was just being able to enjoy the time to walk around and immerse myself in that moment because that sounds silly, but like it sounds silly, but that's not my wasn't my normal. So being able to actually enjoy walking down that alley and taking my time looking at things without my phone blowing up, 50 different times, or constantly being asked where I'm at, or, being questioned or being put on FaceTime to verify where I was
Wow.
at.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
things like that.
Yeah.
y- It was the coolest experience ever just to actually be in that moment, like we were talking about last week, is being in the moment and enjoying it.
Yeah. So okay, so you said without your phone blowing up. So take us back a little bit. So I know we talked last week about it being 5 years since you've been physically
Mm,
abused, but for anyone who is still being physically abused, obviously, you know what we're talking about. But then also, even if you have transitioned and you're like transforming your life right now, and we know it's slow, maybe one step at a time. These are the residual things that are left over, right?
yeah.
This idea that me walking down the alleyway was like, we in the alleyway, right? I mean, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I was taking lots of pictures, lots of videos, but I wasn't having the same experiences she was having. Take us back to what did it look like? Like, what was your day like before that, you didn't have that kind of autonomy?
Oh, girl, it was crazy. So I my day would start off like getting up about 4:20 in the morning, and get up, making breakfast for him, getting everything his lunch prepared, things like that. And then because my children needed to be in different school districts, I would drive one child about an hour away, so like 2 hours round trip in the morning. And then as soon as I get back, I would drive my other child 30 minutes away, so another hour round trip in the morning, just because of time differences, like having to make
Right.
sure that they each got the education that they needed. So there was all of that. And then that repeated in the afternoon.
And you didn't
Um,
have no support for that. You were doing that on your own.
that was all me.
Did you ever ask for support? I'm sorry. Is that a rude question? Did you ever ask?
No, 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 that's not a rude question. Asking for it's not something you can ask for. Even
Okay.
if you did ask for it, it's not going to be possible. you know? Um, because I was mom, I was a stay-at-home mom, so because of that, it was all on me. Like that fell underneath the criteria of everything that I had to take care of for being a mom and having that privilege, I guess you could say.
Right.
So,
Did
but
it feel like so? I remember you saying at one point, and I think this is really important. And again, y'all, we get into touchy stuff. We don't plan out everything. So she might tell me, no, I'm not answering that. That might happen. If it happens,
Oh,
I'm not going to edit it out. Um, but I know that your deceased husband was a good provider. I
very
know
good
he was a good
provider.
provider. He's a good provider. And so you
Mhm.
said this fell under the requirements, but did it ever feel like at any time when it was happening, like this seems more without any assistance? Did it ever feel that way?
There were like all the time, because of the fact that things were so unrealistic of what he was asking of me on a daily, constant basis. It was so overwhelming. Because I'm only one person,
Right.
and then there's like 5 of them, so that was just a lot. But then also the part uh, that made things even harder was the constant phone calls.
Okay,
So
talk about that. What does that
okay,
mean?
so what that would look like is a regular day. Um, okay, so I dropped off the kids. I would have to call him on the way driving up to drop off my oldest daughter. And then I would have to call him again when I was driving back so he would know where I was at. There would be, and then I would have to like drop a location or I would have to,
Really?
yeah, yeah. But a lot of it was to, um, it's crazy looking back that I had to actually do this. But even if I was going to the grocery store, I would have to have him on FaceTime or contact him on the phone, let him know I was going to the grocery store, even though it was like 5 minutes away. I would have to show him the kids in the back seat to show I wasn't alone. And then I would have to get inside. I get off the phone, get the babies in the cart and all, and then go inside. And then from there, I'd have to like be on FaceTime again to show him this is the kids. And then he would call sporadically through being in the store, and I would have to do a panorama of like who was around me.
No, Morgan.
It was crazy, you know. And
And
then
the
that
kids were small, so they don't,
they don't
daddy's on
think
the
anything
phone. Yeah.
exactly. So it wasn't a big deal to them. They got to see their daddy, right? Um, and that would go and then that went right as soon as I got in the car, it was that pattern. I constantly had to call. And then heaven forbid I don't answer the phone,
Oh,
then that was a whole nother world of craziness. You know what I mean? And it's not just physical, the psychological, that's part of the
yeah,
psychological abuse that I was telling you about before. The things that we don't realize are an issue. It may seem in the beginning that it's like, "Oh, it's so sweet. He wants to know I'm okay," because that's how it was portrayed in the beginning.
that's
Is
how it
I just need to
starts.
know, make sure, you're not feeling well today, so let me make sure you're okay,
Yeah,
that you're driving
yeah,
there, you get there safely kind of thing. But that's not what it was at all.
right. So how many times a day do you think you would have to answer your phone?
That's I can't I'll just put it this way. I remember that within an hour, he called over 60 times. So that's like a time once a minute. There was this one section where it was like blowing up. And I'm like, how do you have this much time to
You're
be
working,
you're at work. Like, how are you blowing up my phone? But because of the fact that he was the boss on the job, he
right,
didn't have to answer to anybody. So he could do whatever
right.
he needed to. He could come and go as he pleased, so that wasn't an issue. But a normal a normal relationship would be like, "Oh, they're busy. They'll call me back when they get the
Right,
message."
right, right,
You know
right,
what I
right,
mean?
right,
But that's
right,
not what this looked like.
right. So, it's interesting because we were doing research and everything for the magazine and just reading articles and things like that about what women are going through right now. I think, or would you agree that, the technology that we have is amazing, what we're able to do for work and what we're able to do remote, but in a domestic violence situation, it's much worse.
Mhm.
50 years ago, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So it makes it much worse. And it's easier to be under the guise of love or concerned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you think, again, I know I asked this last week, but how do you think that a woman would know the difference? Like, what do you almost feel like? Is there a switch where you start to think, this doesn't feel normal?
Okay, so there's not even a switch. We knew it from the beginning that
Okay.
something's off. Like, there's that one moment in the beginning of the relationship where why it's like, "Why are you doing this?" Or, "Why did you ask me this?" Or, "Seriously, dude?" It's literally that. But we block it out. because there's so many positive parts of the relationship, or they're showing us a lot of attention or affection or love bombing us with things. So where it's easy for us to block it out.
Right.
Um, just because we want to be loved. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So we're willing to overlook a lot of stuff.
Right. And of course, that isn't love.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So, all right. So we know you were a great mom. Like, you're a super mom. You're doing all the things. And obviously, a lot of times, and I mean, I became a stay-at-home mom for a short period of time, but then I quickly started, I don't know, 8 businesses, and so I was a work-at-home, stay-at-home mom kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and I think that friends of mine who were not in abusive relationships, but who were stay-at-home moms, they had some time. They did have time. They had like the downtime. Like you think back in the 50s, the mom, and she'd go out and get her hair done, then she'd go
Oh,
shop for
right.
dress, and then she changed her clothes and put her makeup on because her man was coming home. And really,
Right.
stay-at-home mom dumb doesn't look like that anymore anyway, right? But
Okay.
for you, did it feel like you had free time? I mean, did
Oh, dear God, no. No, there was no free time at all because he made sure that I was constantly doing something. So, um, just between like the regular household chores, and when I say that he provided very well for us, I mean above and beyond.
okay,
Above and beyond. And that's also where those huge gestures of love, or gestures of, I don't even know what you would
because
call
he
them, huge
could.
gestures, because he could, right? He took financially amazing care of us. But the price that we had to pay to live that kind of lifestyle wasn't realistic. So we could have afforded to have like our own chef, our, somebody coming in and cleaning
Right.
the house, somebody doing the laundry, somebody taking care of the yard, kinds of things. But that wasn't an option because I was a stay-at-home mom. That was all on me, on top of taking care of the 4 children,
Wow.
and on top of taking care of their education and their spirituality and everything else. That was all on me. But then the other part of that was hard was all of the extracurricular activities. So at first, I thought it was because mm, let me just say it and then I'll go back. At first, I thought it was just because he wanted the kids to be a part of the extracurricular activities and have something to do. And
Okay.
yes, that may
Okay.
have been a part of it.
Okay.
But the other part of it is he wanted to make sure like every hour, 30 minutes of my
Oh,
day
your mind
was
of your life.
accounted for. Right. So he knew that from this time period to this time period, we're at football, we're at gymnastics, we're at this, we're at that. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Because it was easier to control me
Yeah.
in yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. There wasn't time to breathe. I mean, it was so bad that I remember one year, like, I ended up getting, like, 2 tickets in a matter of, like, a month because there was not enough time in
To
between the
get from
events.
one place to the
Yeah, to get from
next.
one place to the next. And then I remember, like, my youngest son, he was like, "I don't even wanna do this anymore." He's like, "This isn't fun anymore." He's like, "I'm exhausted. I'm tired." And think about it because we would be running from, like, you know, 5
Early in the morning.
yeah, like early in the morning, and we wouldn't be done with our nights
Oh,
getting
because
home.
wait a minute. So when you took your oldest son, the kids were little, so you had to put them in the car.
Yeah. So I would take my
Everyone had to
oldest
be with you.
constantly. That was the other thing.
Wow.
I was never allowed to be alone,
Wow.
ever.
Oh, now I
So
understand okay.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
So
So
I wanna just real quick, I wanna interject something like, it you know, as a coach, I know from my perspective, if I'm working with a client, I'm gonna ask them, like, "How can you incorporate something that you need?" In fact, in the magazine and getting to after, our midlife magazine, it's gonna highlight something about this, couple things about this. And even within that time frame, what I've helped some clients, and again, this is not domestic violence, so if it doesn't translate, it may not translate, but within those time frames, finding those moments. So say, for example, if you're in the midst of this and you're like, I have no time, ask yourself, what might I be able to do in the midst of this time? So, for example, and again, not a domestic violence situation, but when I started becoming a state, I was working, I was at home, really not working much. But I was doing homeschool.
mhm,
And I'm just mentioning that I need Chaton time. Like, I need it, right? But my daughter Caitlin was in horseback riding and something else, something else. And so what I would do was I wasn't maybe the best picturesque mom. I went and I saw her put on her helmet and I went and saw her put on her special pants and I always met with the instructor every weekend and said hello. And then I went to my car and I read. I would
Mm,
walk around the outside and get some like steps in. It was very beautiful where where the horses were and stuff. And sometimes I just spent time outside. So in the midst of it, it could be just feeding yourself just a tiny bit if you can find that little moment of time to feed yourself, because that is something that really will feed your core energy so that you have a little bit more strength. So I just
mm,
want to interject that because I remember what I remember from our relationship at that time. And again, you could always kind of shut me out, so to speak, as so I didn't know everything that was going on. I mean, I'm across the country and you hadn't revealed yet that you were in a situation. I just knew that I never saw people do as much as you were doing. It didn't make sense. And I didn't know to ask, like, are you happy? Is
mm,
this okay for you? And so I do think from an outsider's, and we're going to have an episode where we talk a little bit about the friends of people that are, attached, or when you think something looks off. I would just ask the wrong question. Are you okay?
mm,
And then I would internalize, you mad at me? Because I wouldn't hear from you. And
mm.
so we make it personal, but it really was about the other person. And so I would have asked different questions like, are you happy? You know,
Yeah.
how
Well, and
happy are you right now?
that's a good point too, because I remember those times where I would go like radio silence, it'd be like dead silence. And it was because it got too real. Like I was allowing you to get too close. So then to protect you and to protect my kids and myself, I would distance myself because I was scared to tell the truth,
Yeah,
or I was giving you too much of the truth at
right,
once, which could have been catastrophic. Right.
right. For catastrophic in what way?
Um,
Like, what did you imagine that might happen?
oh my word. Well, first of all, for him to have the truth be told about him,
Okay,
like the consequences for that would have been crazy. That we were putting our business in the street, as he would always say, and it would come back on myself for my oldest son.
right,
So the mental and emotional or physical abuse that would come from that, um, or him taking the truth and manipulating it to punish me,
okay,
to make it seem like even if I told him the truth, and he would twist it and manipulate it into making me feel like I did something wrong because
okay,
I said it.
okay.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Well, you're supposed to.
Well,
I mean, abusers don't typically shout from the rooftops that they're doing this. So
yeah.
I know that, you know, in this series, we'll talk a little bit about that, because there was obviously, we talked a little bit about gaslighting
Mm.
and what that looks like, but then also there was that reverse abuse. I remember you telling me about someone that you've worked with whose husband actually, while abusing her, was busy making audio tapes as if she was hitting him.
Oh,
So I
yes.
so I know that that is something that happens. So, um, it's if you're gonna be a good friend to someone, it's through the good times and bad. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna put that there.
Mm,
All right, so changing gears for a second.
mhm.
I know in the midst of all this, you're very well taken care of financially, but you had decided to start a small business.
Yeah.
Um, without getting into why you decided that or even what the business was, at that
Mhm.
point is when we met. Our lives kind of intersected because of the business.
Right.
And I just always imagined you were amazing, you were sweet, you were so good at meeting people. And I was like, teach me how. Like, you were so good at that. And yet you weren't succeeding in your business.
Mm.
Talk to me about how that intersected with the abuse.
Oh, well, so first of all, I was so excited to start my new company, because I've been a commercial and residential contractor forever, right? But that wasn't I wasn't able to do that for multiple reasons just because of having more family. So by being able to have like a small little business of my own that I was able to do, it put me in contact with positive upbuilding women, right?
Okay.
So I was able to start my like support group, my
Yes. Yes.
foundation, my circle of friends. So that was super important, but also like driving factor was financially. So even though we were financially set, it gave me the opportunity to start like squirreling away
Okay. So
money.
it's for preparation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was getting taken care of
I never
emotionally.
knew that. I
Yeah,
love that in this podcast I get to learn things. I didn't know that. Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So that's a
So,
tip, you know, squirrel away what you can. Okay.
mhm.
All right. So tell us. So why you were great at it? You had amazing personality for it. You had like all the things going for you. Was it that he didn't want you to like what happened?
Uh, there was multiple things, like, he was just really good at getting in my head. So, like, for instance, like, part of the reward system that I would get with my work wasn't just financially, but it was also with, like, jewelry and gifts and things like that. And I remember I was so stoked, dude, because I came home and I earned all of this stuff, and the kids were, like, cheering me on and everything because they would come with
Oh,
me to work too, right? They were, like, my support team. And, I came home and I was, like, showing him something, and he took it and he goes, "I don't hear any money," and, like, threw it across the thing, right?
wow.
He's like, "When you bring me home money, then it means something. Otherwise, like, it's nothing," right? So in my mind, all of a sudden, there was, like, a it didn't matter that I was doing good and I was excelling at a really, really high pace, actually. Like, I was
Wow.
excelling really, really well, but because there wasn't numbers attached to it, it didn't mean anything to him because that's what he held value to was money, right?
Okay.
So then later that trickled down into me doubting myself
Okay.
and, like, a self like, my self-worth, my value
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
to whether or not I was even capable of continuing on with this career.
Even though initially you had no doubts.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, because I was passionate about it. Like, I
Yeah.
loved it. I
Yeah.
love helping women, so I was really, really good at it. Um, but then that even trickles down to even currently, like, me having to work through my limiting beliefs with that. Um, trying to understand why I just like why I can't ask for a sale for to close a sale or something like that. It's attached to value, my worth and my
Mhm.
value. You know what I mean? I could talk to anybody like about
We
anything,
I know
like
that
quick,
much.
like
It's
quicker
true.
than a hiccup, right?
But then I remember you would meet people, they were really interested in what you had. Now, it is different now. I want to
Yeah,
say to give hope that in our partnership, she is the marketing guru over here. And I'm the one who's gone to school with marketing and all these things. But her person, Morgan, is like she's the top notch girl, right? Whoever's out there with business, don't be trying to steal my partner, okay? She's amazing with marketing. Um, but I remember that you would have so many leads. You'd have so many people that were interested in what you had going on. And yet it's not just closing the sale, you weren't even following up.
right. So that led into um, being scared of the phone because remember I said that he would blow up my phone constantly? I had so much anxiety just around my
Oh,
telephone all the time and answering the phone or seeing a number that I
oh,
didn't
I
know
feel that.
that I couldn't. So then I had to start reframing that and I would make sure that I put the person's name immediately in my phone and I would take a picture with them and put it in my phone attached to the contacts so then I could see who's calling. You know what I mean? So it doesn't cause
Okay.
any severe
Okay.
anxiety to stop what I had already created, you
Okay.
know? But even to this day, that's something that I've been working through is not being scared of who's on the other end of the line, because of something that happened so long ago.
Right. Right. It must feel so good that you can answer your phone.
It's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing, but then also learning how to get to that point. So like I
Right.
said, taking the time just to put the phone number in, putting a picture attached with it so then when it does pop up, I'm not triggered, by the and having the anxiety of not knowing who's there. Is it somebody else being manipulating me
And
kind
I
of
guess
thing?
that would have helped as far as safety as well, because if your phone is there and then he sees a picture of a woman pop up and,
Mhm.
name and who you're taking a picture,
Yeah.
it may not be someone that he knew, but at least he's not like, who's that calling? It was a safety measure. So
Mhm.
that might be something as well that, we throughout this series, we want to drop little gems that might be something you hadn't thought of that might
Yeah.
help you to be protected. So
Mhm. Yep. Well, and then that's part of it too. Remember, like he would cut me off from my friends and family. So even though there
um,
was a picture of somebody else on it, it's like, well, where did you meet them? When did you have time to talk to them? Why didn't you tell me about it? That kind of thing. So it's a double-edged sword. It's just learning how to
navigate.
use the tool. Yeah, the tools that I have to make it
Yeah.
less. less
to
crazy.
make it less. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you did it. You
Yeah.
did it. You know, one of the things that I love about how you've navigated all of this, and we're going to be talking about that again in the future episodes, is how you've navigated this as a mom and providing that support for your family as now a single mom because
Mm,
your ex-husband is deceased. Um, but also the fact that you could have just turned your back on all of this. You could have just said, okay, it's not my life anymore, so I'm good. And one of
mhm,
the reasons why we're doing this series is because we're learning more and more women that are happily married have buried
mhm,
abuse. Unfortunately, the body doesn't bury it with you.
mhm,
The body holds on to it. That might be weight, it might be anxiety, it might be pain in your back, it could be sleepless nights and insomnia. And then what we do is we then blame it on this. Oh, I'm in midlife, so I'm in perimenopause. That's the reason why I'm not sleeping. Oh, I eat too much and I'm gaining weight. It may not be any of those things. It might be that you're holding something that's heavy. It could
mhm.
be that you need to learn how to use a modality like emotional freedom technique to disconnect from it. I wish I had known it then, Morgan.
Yeah.
I wish I had known it then to share with you, even if, I'm not, we don't advocate women specifically leaving because we're not marriage counselors and that's not really our goal. Our goal is to help the woman herself to
Mhm,
cope and come up with her own decisions, but healthful ones. And I like how you said today that you were already that was in your mindset, even though it was years before you finally exited, you were planning. And I
mhm,
guess that was part of you keeping me safe at that point because you never told me. I didn't know what was going on, right?
mhm.
Um, so fast forwarding now, right? So now you're in a position where you're free. Um, to give hope as we kind of close up for the day, what is a message that you would say to someone who's kind of out of it but is still struggling with like one foot in and one foot out? Like that transition, like when you were first in the beginning, you were still kind of running away. You were still running, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Um, what would you say to her who has that one foot in, one foot out? I'm not really sure. What message could you give her about, and I mean, maybe she's finished. I'm sure it's a very long question. I'm sorry. When I tell you guys, I'm not scripted. Okay, this is real deal here, and I'm kind of getting this thought that I need to ask this question. Someone who has gone through this, but still feels kind of tethered to it, still feels that idea of I can answer my phone or I can't have free time or not worth spending this time in self care, what would you tell her?
Knowledge is power. And so just ask more questions. Um, Reach out to people that aren't in or do like listen to podcasts, listen to whatever you can get your hands on um, from people that have gone through similar situations like this, so that you can kind of get an idea of where to go from here. Because there's a lot of different tools out there. There's a lot of different modalities that you can use to start healing, even though you're not necessarily out of it completely. Um, because honestly, like you're never
Mhm.
completely done with it. It's part of your life, it's part of your story, but that doesn't mean that you can't disconnect from it. So just
Right.
be willing to listen to the people that are willing to give you the knowledge, that are willing to
Mm.
speak on it.
I like that. So
Hmm.
be willing to investigate.
Yes.
Even I guess it can feel scary, because even if it's admitting it, so whether you're still in it or you're outside of it,
Yeah.
we don't want to delve into chaos. So it's like I'm good, I'm out. But
Mhm.
as you mentioned, it is a part of your story. And, a lot of people say things like, I'm so happy that happened because it made me who I am today. I don't want anyone to think that that's really true. Like, I don't believe that, especially when it comes to this. Something that scars you hard is not also building you as a person. Like, don't believe the hype. It's not true. And I would rather take being a smaller person than to suffer in chaos. So
Mhm.
sometimes we have to think about what's real and ask yourself the question like what's real. So if you're kind of like if you've moved out of it and maybe everything's looking good, you've got the house, the kids are good, things are going well, but you have trouble, you're triggered by certain sounds. You may be triggered by certain smells. You may be I know you are. I know you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. You may be triggered by movies. a commercial might trigger you. And you're like, and you forgot because you can't bury the truth. That's what was already happening. So stepping out of this, getting to after means even if you've buried it, we're not trying to exhume any emotions here, but in order to disconnect from them, you're going to have to go back to them a little bit, and then we can teach you how to disconnect.
Mhm. Or even realizing that there's certain times of the year that are gonna be more of a trigger for you than others. Like when you brought up smells and sounds, that was huge. So you can get to a point where you can kind of pre-plan for it and know that at like, this day on this, this at this time is gonna be a lot for me. So I can start mentally preparing myself and my children. And
That's
like doing
right.
the tapping ahead of time really does help with that.
Yes.
So
And
because it could
that's why, you're coming to see me soon, right? So we can, my family, we can love you up and love those kids
oh
up
my
and
goodness.
everything,
Yes.
love you up. So that when the harder times come in a couple of months, when those trigger
Yeah.
dates come and stuff, you have something else to fall back on because, and for me, what I tend to do is I tend to, even though it seems totally counterintuitive, on some of the worst dates that I have, because I'm very memory driven, then I stack. So I will stack something really good on a really bad date. That's how I do it so that I can
Smart.
reframe that date, right? So this week was my father's anniversary of my dad's death. And so instead of immediately what comes to me is wallowing. So of course I woke up, I prayed, I meditated, I read my Bible, and then I did my tapping. I did some movement. And then and it was in the middle of a hurricane, right? But then I stacked something really sweet on that day because now and I've been doing this for years. So I do my routine, my spiritual routine, I do my, my wellness modalities, but then I stack something sweet on there so that that's not the only memory because that's the only way you can do this. It's deep, right? That's
That's
the only
really
way. It's,
smart.
it's really good, girl.
Yeah.
I'm good. Right now I'm
Yeah.
teasing, but it's good
Yeah.
stacking other things so that your brain can start to say, well, we remember that on that day. Well, that happened too, but this also
Mhm.
happened. People do the opposite. I can't believe such and such happened. That's a special day for me. Stack something sweet on it and reframe what that day means.
Mhm.
We
Well, that's
have
just
control over that.
yeah. Well, that's like me telling the kids there's always something that we can glean from every situation. So what's something positive we can get from this? What is something that we can life skill that I can learn from every situation and then
Yeah.
apply it later? That's a
Yeah.
really good idea, Shadone. I like that.
Stacking it up, babe. All
Yeah.
right, listen, we are about to close out. I do want to make sure that you know that we were talking a little bit about little limiting beliefs today. What happens in these abusive relationships, how it affects you. And one thing we want to make sure that you're getting from this is that we use emotional freedom technique. We also use core energy coaching. If you'd like to work with either one of us, you could absolutely do that. You can go to tapping at gettingtoafter.com, and that is something that we both have access to. If you're like, I'm not sure about the tapping, I don't know how this works, I want you to go to get our free workbook. Our free workbook, the link is bit.ly/, all in capital letters, G2A-LB1. That's bit.ly/G2A-LB1. And that is our workbook where we not only teach you about what a limiting belief is, what it means when your thought process is actually limiting you, but then how can you release that through using emotional freedom technique? And we teach you all of that for free. The workbook's an amazing download. You can get it instantly. So I would really recommend that. And watch out for our new easy Getting to After because it's on its way and it's really, really phenomenal. Morgan, thank you so much for being.
Oh,
I mean, right now you're my co-host, but you've also been being interviewed, and I know it's heavy. It's heavy on me. I
mhm.
feel it, but I appreciate you so much. I know this is a labor of love, and the challenge is real, but it's also going to give so much hope to people. So thank you so much for doing it with me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you guys soon.